that time again. If you're a real estate agent and you're looking to finally build a business that creates consistent cash flow, but you're concerned about all the market disruptions, relax. You found your safe haven to learn the secret to success. If you list, you last. Welcome to this week's podcast. Hey, welcome fellow listing agents. Believe it or not, we're on week 20 of the If You List, You Last podcast. So today I'm going to do something different. I had an entirely different topic set up for this week. And then Friday's NAR Settlement changed the topic for me. And so what I'm going to talk to you about today, not so much about the settlement, because gosh, that's everywhere. The question is going to be is what do you do about it? Like, how does this impact your business and things of that nature? We're going to go into that today versus my topic, which I'll cover next week. Now, as always, make sure you join our Real Estate Asset Advisors Facebook group. If you have questions, especially on this NAR settlement topic, make sure that you join in the conversation. Leave us comments, questions, things like that. If there's topics you want me to cover, I'm happy to do it. But you got to go there, become a member, and leave that information for me. So today, I'm going to take a little different approach. I always start out with the mortgage market update, and I'm not really going to do that today because I'm going to talk about how important it is to understand the mortgage process even more now with this whole NAR settlement. So unfortunately, I made some notes. So I'll have to look away a little bit and go through my notes because I want to make sure we get covered. So let's get rolling. Number one, there's 5 things that you need to do. The most important, folks, is you have to understand why we get paid what we get paid. Now, Yesterday, I normally take and record Charles Payne on Fox Business, and I like his show because he brings different money managers in and different investment funds and things like that, so I get a diverse opinion about different looks on the market. But Friday, he led off his show with the whole NAR settlement that 6% commissions are gone forever. Yesterday, he had 2 agents come on who was supposedly supposed to explain how this worked. And quite honestly, folks, the representation that he had, one of the participants, this orange and yellow haired lady with tattoos all down her neck and face, and another person that said virtually nothing. That's not the best representation of our industry. And I don't know why he would do that when on CNBC, you have Ryan Serhant go on there and give a intelligent, cogent response to this. And at the end of the day, our 2 people on Fox Business said the reason that this is going on is because of the inventory shortage. Now, I almost broke a blood vessel when I heard that. This has been going on for almost 8 years. This is long before we had a massive inventory shortage. What are these 2 people talking about? And one of the things I can tell you from years of speaking on stage, webinars, every place, agents don't even understand why we get paid what we get paid. And the answer is a very simple one word, why we get paid what we get paid. It's liability. We are in one of the most litigious industries on the planet. In some states, real estate lawsuits comprise 25 to 30% of the lawsuits filed in any given state. Divorce outpaces that. But other than that, real estate is usually number 2 in lawsuits. Because we deal in such a detailed industry where there are laws, there's disclosure, there's all these things that happen, the minute a seller signs a listing agreement or the minute a buyer signs a buyer-broker agreement, we agreed to inherit their liability. It's our job to make sure that the seller's doing the right disclosures and they do it properly. And it's our job to make sure that the buyers are getting the disclosures and that we answer that and we don't just blow it off. What do you think will happen? Because I've seen a lot of comments online. I actually waited as long as I could today to record this because I'm really paying attention to what's going on online and some of the responses and things. And there are so many people on there going, oh, good, we can finally sell our house without a realtor. Hey, newsflash, folks, you've always been able to do that. What are you talking about? You always could do that. Here's the bad news. If you sell it on your own, you're the one absorbing all the liability. Go ahead and don't disclose something that was a material fact and then have the buyer find it after closing and they go hire a lawyer. The other part of that, folks, is the reason a seller will always need to have a real estate agent, and some of us are far better at it, than others. We have to be honest. The reason that we're in business, when we list a piece of real estate, we actually have the ability to take and create and attract more buyers, which creates competition, and competition drives the price of home higher. Anybody have any doubt on that? Just look at the real estate market for the last 3 or 4 years with low inventory and people looking to buy. What's happened to housing prices, right? So this isn't something we even have to explain to a consumer anymore. They're experiencing this. So when a seller says, hey, I don't have to pay a real estate commission, you never did. But my question is, tell me how you're going to take and attract a high number of buyers so that you can create competition amongst those buyers so they'll be willing to pay you more for your house. And the answer for most sellers, like 99.9% of them, is they simply can't. Now, as a real estate agent, you better be prepared to answer that question. What is it that you do? What's your process look like that allows you to take and attract real estate buyers and create competition for that listing? And if you don't have a process for that, you better get one. Because now more than ever, folks, the consumer is going to be asking, what value do you bring to the transaction? And if you don't have a process to do it, you will be in trouble. Make no mistake about it, right? So the number one reason we get paid what we get paid is liability. Listen, if you want to take a listing and charge $1,000 for it, you have every right to do it. And the seller can negotiate that. They always have had that ability to do it. But as a real estate agent, are you really willing to take on all that liability for $1,000 or 1% or something like that? And then if you did do that, how much time, energy, and money can you spend to attract a larger number of buyers to create competition for the listing? Now, one of the inborn or inbred devices that we have is the MLS. We leverage all the realtors in our market. For example, in Maricopa County, Arizona, there's 55,000 real estate agents. Many of them have buyers that they're currently working with. That's one way we leverage that. But let's be honest, they're not going to do it for free because they're not going to absorb the liability on the buyer side, are they? And so consequently, we can leverage other realtors to attract buyers to do that, but there's going to be a cost to do it. The only question a seller has to answer is, will that competition exceed what I'm going to pay in compensation to the real estate agents? It's really the only question that has to be answered. Now, sellers never will really be able to do that on their own because let's say that out of those 55,000, let's say we averaged 500 in a CRM per agent. Some will have more, some will obviously have none. But at the end of the day, that'd be about 27,000 potential buyers that we could market that property to through connecting with other real estate agents. MLS just happens to be the way that we do it. The truth is, whether MLS survives this or not, I have no idea. My own hope would be it doesn't. I don't think MLS does anything to serve us. There's other ways to handle this. And then the other thing that's going to be critical for you to be able to do is to explain this settlement to the consumer. Because all over Facebook, all you're seeing is, woo, I don't have to pay a real estate agent anymore. No, not really. If you want their services, you have to pay for it, just as you always have. So the settlement did nothing. So what I want to do is make sure that, number two, you actually understand what the settlement says. Because it doesn't say anything about not charging commission. It doesn't say anything about not charging 6%. So the first thing you have to do is you have to understand why we get paid. Number two, you have to be able to explain this settlement to them. Make sense? So first thing you have to do is get educated. Now, I believe most companies, and I see enough stuff online, that our companies are doing a pretty good job of explaining it. NAR, I haven't seen anything from NAR, which really is quite disappointing, right? But the number one thing I would tell you to do right now, folks, is you need to separate your emotion from facts. Many real estate agents are scared to death. How am I going to survive this? And what am I going to do? And buyers aren't going to pay anymore and all that. First of all, you've got to take and pull your emotions out. And now it's just time for business. We have to analyze and we have to adapt. Because at the end of the day, folks, if you overreact and you do that based on facts that are wrong, then you're making bad business decisions. So let's talk about what it actually does say. First, it does not regulate commissions. And the MLS never did. The reason people mostly charge 5 and 6% is because we absorb a massive amount of liability. Yes, we do work in there, and yes, we have all those things that we can tell people about, but literally it's a transfer of liability from them to us. So that's why we get paid what we get paid. So just so you're clear, NAR never dictated what commissions were. I've been doing this for 33 years. I've never heard a company dictate what commissions could be. We usually talk in 5 and 6% because we're going to split that and we absorb the liability. The problem is, as an industry, we do a really bad job of being able to explain to the consumer why we get paid what we get paid. Now it's going to force us to do that. And the truth is, I actually think this is a good thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. And then most importantly, folks, I'm using the 9 MLSs that comprise Southern California, and this is about a year-old piece of data. 38% of every listing in those 9 MLSs were offering 1.5% or less in buyer broker compensation. The consumer's always been able to negotiate that, and the listing agents were the ones who controlled it. I actually think it's pretty good that the buyer's agents will have more control over that. But they're going to have to explain the value to their consumer. So NAR never set commissions. What they did, what this settlement really did, is it going to continue to work by and large the same way. It's just going to get to a different, we're going to get there differently. And so once we understand what this settlement agrees to, all it says is, 1, you can't show commissions in MLS. All right, no big deal. Their contention is that buyer's agents looked at the commission being offered and steered people away from those properties. Guys, I'm not going to tell you that's never happened, but I don't know many agents who did it. I'm sure there's some. So that's going to go away. Not a big deal. Then the MLSs have to adjust their software to say, nowhere can it say anything about buyer agency commission. So far, that doesn't affect you, does it? The seller can still offer compensation. It just has to be in writing. Guys, I have a 1,100 agent real estate group in 44 states and 5 countries. And I'm not sure what they're talking about because every listing agreement I've ever seen clearly spells out what portion of the listing or the compensation is going to the buyer's agent. So we're going to write it a little differently. Big deal. We're already doing that. Why are we freaking out about it? It's not a big deal, is it? Oh, by the way, your website and your brokerage website can advertise commission. Hey, here's a thought for all of you. Why are we paying these exorbitant fees to NAR to show listings to the public like Zillow and Realtor.com and all them? Why don't we just collectively get together as an industry, create our own website to syndicate listings to where we all agree the companies can all own an exact percentage. If there's 20 companies that put it together, then you own 1/20th of this. We can advertise commissions. We don't need MLS and we don't need NAR, or we don't need NAR. We don't need Zillow. We don't need Realtor.com. And we're in control of that data, which puts us even closer to the consumer. We can tell them what the buyer's agent compensation is because I believe transparency is a good thing. So what are we so afraid of? That's not any big change. So they're saying you must have a buyer, in this agreement, you must have a buyer broker agreement in order to be able to show homes. I've only been teaching that for 33 years. I've never worked with a buyer where I didn't have a buyer broker agreement. I don't know how they're going to enforce that, right? So are you going to have an open house and if an agent comes in, you're going to go, hey, in order to be able to come in, you have to show me your buyer broker agreement. I don't see that happening, but that's a whole nother issue, how that would be enforced. As an industry, I think you're crazy if you didn't have a buyer broker agreement signed. You're willing to do all that work, and somebody could walk into a new home subdivision and you no longer got paid, yet you invested all this time, effort, money in doing it. So the truth is, I actually think that's a great thing for the real estate industry. Now, what it really does is forces you to be able to state your value proposition to a client, which again, I don't know how that's a bad thing. So sellers can still offer buyer's agent compensation and they can still negotiate it. So tell me what's different. If you're the MLS, it's different. But other than, I'd probably have to call a listing agent when I'm showing a house or setting it up and ask, what compensation are you offering? So probably adds a step into the process, but big deal. We get to the same destination. We might get there a little bit differently than most of you have done it in the past. But if you've already been using buyer broker agreements and you've explained to people how we actually get compensated, I don't see what the big deal is. So all that fear that you have, useless, right? So you're spending a lot of time and energy right now on fear of things that really aren't any different than they were on Friday. Now, if you haven't been doing those things, it'll force you to do it, which again, I think is a good thing. So number 2 is you've got to be able to explain that. That's all you have to explain, folks. Can't put it in MLS anymore. MLS can't have it in there, but sellers can still offer it. Just has to be done in writing, which it's always been done that way. And you have the ability to negotiate with the seller. Okay, nothing different. And finally, you need to have a buyer broker agreement, which again, I'm not sure how you police it, but how do you explain it, right? So that's number 2. Number 3, you need to understand the buyer broker's form. And what I could tell you as we sit here now, most companies are in the process of revamping their documents. I know ours is. So at the end of the day, I can't tell you what it's going to look like, but your companies will put that out there. I don't see NAR having that conversation with you guys. Do you? Anybody see it in their own MLSs? Our MLSs haven't said a peep. So you're going to have to rely on your company, but when it comes out, you're going to want to go through that training and know what it says and how to explain it. But probably the biggest thing that you need to understand is how are you going to explain to somebody how you get paid? So let me give you a news flash. You're all worried about, oh my God, we have to tell a buyer that they're paying the commission. They always have. Let's be honest, they always have. And if you doubt me, tell me if this is what it sounded like for you in a listing presentation. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what were you thinking of selling the house for? They give you a price. You go, great. How'd you come up with that? They'll give you a little bit of peripheral things about, I seen this on Zillow and my neighbor sold it for this, so that's what I want. It's great. What do you need to net from the property? They know the number. And so how did you determine that price? And they're going to say to you, most cases, in some form of this, we've seen what others are selling for, but we need to net X dollars. And we know the real estate commission is going to be X, 5%, 6%, 4%, whatever it is. And we factored that into the price that we list the home at. And it gives us a little bit of room to negotiate if somebody wants to get a deal. Is that by and large what it sounded like for the last 50 years? It hasn't it? The seller simply added the commission to the price. Is there anything wrong with that? No. Does this settlement tell the seller that they can't do that anymore? No. It's how it's always been done. The problem is we're not transparent. And so 7 years ago, I created the Home Boss listing system to be 100% transparent in the process. My theory was pretty simple. How in the world could I ever get sued if I told you how it worked and I showed you how it worked? Now, many agents over the last 7 years have argued with me and called us names and all these other things because we simply made it transparent. We taught the consumer how it worked. But when I talk to consumers and I explain that's typically how it works, the problem is, as a buyer, you don't understand how our compensation affects the price of the house. Now, we believe that it's important for you to understand that to be able to make good financial decisions. What do you think? Would you rather know how it really works, or would you rather keep it behind the curtain? Guys, I've never had a consumer say, no, keep it behind the curtain. I don't want to know. What they always said to me was, wow, that's awesome. How come everybody doesn't do that? My answer would be is if you were doing it the way we've been doing it for the last 7 years, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. And the question is, what are you going to do about it going forward? I literally looked at this 7 or really going on 8 years ago and said, boy, we have to create a solution to this. And I did. And it's worked really well. So you're going to have to understand how that works. But all it is, folks, we just have to be transparent with people how it works. You're still going to have the ability, the seller can still pay the commission. They could pay some of the commission, or they could pay none of the commission. And the buyer will be able to take and say, let's just use a $500,000 house, $15,000. You say, hey, my fee is 3% or whatever number you have. It doesn't matter to me. But you say my fee is $15,000, and the seller of that house says, I'm not paying anything to a buyer. So the buyer says, I have to write a check for you, or do I just move on to another house? My opinion, what most people do, they'll move to a different house. So if sellers say, hey, I'm not willing to do this, they just decrease the likelihood that they're going to create competition for their listing, for their sale, and they'll get a lower price. That's all it is. But those are the three options, folks. Seller's going to pay it all. A seller will pay some and they have to write you a check, or they have to write you a check, all of it. That's it. Explain it to them. And just basically tell them on every listing, I'm going to let you know what the seller's offering so we can look at that and allow you to make the decision that's best for you. You're in complete control. What would you be afraid of telling a buyer that for? So we're worried about things that we really shouldn't. So number 3 is understand the buyer broker form and start to get transparent with people. I don't know how that would ever hurt us as an industry, right? Number 4, this is the big one. Develop your value proposition. If you can't tell people why they should hire you, they won't. Big revelation, right? But here's the deal, guys. You're going to have to be open-minded about this new system. It's different. You're going to have different paperwork. You'll have a different process, but it still basically works the same. The difference is, in the past, you've been able to skate away with just telling people, oh, don't worry about it. The seller pays my fee. Just so you know, that's in the settlement agreement. You cannot do that because it was never true. The buyer paid your fee in the form of a higher price, period. Just be honest about it. But the problem now is you've got to create a value proposition, and that's going to take some time. Why should they hire you, number 1? And then why should they hire you instead of every other agent? So remember, you're going to be competing against sellers who say, hey, I don't even want to pay a commission. Or they could say, hey, I could hire a mega team. There's people that have TV commercials and everything else. You're competing against that. You could be competing against other traditional agents. So you're going to have to answer that question. So you're going to figure that out. Now, I spend a tremendous amount of time with my agents putting systems like that in place. As soon as that settlement came out, I've been preparing for this for years, but I've made adjustments to a buyer presentation. I've had a buyer presentation for 30 years. I'm going to make a few adjustments to it so that I can explain commissions a little differently, but I've always had a buyer's presentation. Why would you take and have a listing presentation, but not a buyer's presentation? You get paid on both, and you better be able to answer that value proposition. So for me, I've had a system I created literally more than 30 years ago. And what I do is I'm able to take and help teach people who are buying a home, it doesn't matter if they own a home, it's all the same, how they can use a 30-year fixed rate mortgage, but get it paid off in 7 to 10 years. Because they paid the house off and their other debt, because I get the other debt paid off, the money that they were going to pay to the bank in the form of payments, we simply start having them put that money away in a retirement fund. So in many cases, I'm able to take and help a buyer buy a house, pay that loan off in 7 to 10 years, and accumulate a minimum of $1 million in cash in their retirement fund. Now, that does not include the equity in their home. That's on top of it. And I have a documented process that I can walk people through to help them accomplish that. Now, whether they do the process or not is going to be up to them. But I have a documented process. I've created software that allows us to take and show them a presentation. It shows them exactly how much money they would save in payments and interest and how much money they could accumulate if they do that plan. How would you compete against something like that? You're going to have to figure that stuff out, folks. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to be able to answer why you instead of somebody else. Here's the other thing. All over Facebook, and I'm seeing all these agents that are posting like, hey, here's my list of telling everybody what we do in the transaction. I got news for you, folks. They don't care. They look at like, if you get a 3% commission on a $500,000 house, remember the average income in the United States is just a shade under $60,000. You're going to make in one commission what they work 3 months to do. They don't really care how hard you work. Now, you might want to explain the difference in the different tasks and what a difference in importance is to the transaction and why some tasks are worth more than other tasks. But at the end of the day, you're going to have to be able to explain that. I've been on this podcast and I've been teaching for years, real estate agents who now say that, hey, I don't need to understand the mortgage process. I'm just telling you, you better understand the mortgage process because 57% of home buyers seek guidance, not a referral to a lender, want questions answered from their realtor. And you better understand that process if you want to get paid like a professional. If you want to get paid like a referral person, great. That's what you're going to get paid. Yeah, let me have you talk to that. Talk to this lender. No, you need to understand the process and how it works, because you're going to need to provide that guidance to your seller when you get a loan approval now, right? And there's going to be a different process to that, because now they're paying commissions and they could show up in the form of concessions. And how does that affect a VA buyer and things like that? Folks, you better not tell people, hey, I'll get you to my lender and they're going to explain it. What did that just do to your value proposition as you as an expert? Make sense? So you better start paying attention for that. And so at the end of the day, you've got to be able to take and clearly define what your value proposition is for somebody who's going to work with you. Make sense? And then finally, number 5, this is the big one. Guys, nothing's really changed. Stop freaking out. Put your head down, get to work. That's it. Don't sit there and spend all this time trying to figure it all out. I just told you the 5 things that changed, and none of them really impact you other than the language a little bit. A little different process to get you there, but it's the same process. And if you talk to a seller who says, hey, I don't want to offer any commission, that's a FSBO. Go for it. You might want to be able to explain to them why you don't think it's a good strategy if you really want to get more money for your house, but short of that, great. If you have a seller who says, hey, I don't want to pay buyer's agent compensation, and you say, if I had a process where we could get that done for you and it wouldn't affect how much you net, would you be okay with that? If they still say no, guys, you have to determine whether or not you want that listing or not. Doesn't stand as high of a likelihood of selling. If 3 or 4 agents go in and say, if you do that, I just think that's a really bad strategy. It's your call. But I just don't want to take on the work and the effort and the time and the liability when I don't think that I can get the desired result. So nothing's changed. Just put your head down, get to work. I heard the president of one company this week say he's heard all the chatter about become a listing agent only. And he said, if you do that, you're a fool. I'm going to challenge that. The top producing real estate agents or the top earners in real estate have always been the listing agents. Always. Focus on listings. It doesn't say ignore the buyers, right? We do, what I teach my agents is focus on listings where they take 3, 4, 5 listings every month. With the way that we do our open houses, we've gotten as many as 1,200 people at an open house. I'd say our average is more around 200. One of my agents in North Carolina this week just had a $1 million listing, had 150 people into his open house. All those people are potential transactions, right? Whether they're buyers or listings. We need to be able to teach the agents working these open houses how to turn those transactions or those leads into transactions. I'm not saying ignore them. I'm just saying you stay in your lane and focus on listings and have a team of buyers agents that can work those buyers and give them a presentation to be able to explain it to people so that they'll work with them. That's all it comes down to. So the other thing, I couldn't be more excited now about the future of real estate because I think transparency is a good thing. Number 2, you're going to see the creativity come out of some of our best people. I was at an event with some of the biggest producers in the country last week. And what I can tell you is I love being in a room with those people because, man, they're smart as all heck. There's a lot of creative people out there that are come up with very cool systems. So the opportunity to stand out is never been better. And we're forcing the consumer now to say, hey, we have to explain to you why we're worth the money. I think you should have been doing that a long time ago, but now you're going to be forced to. So at the end of the day, I actually think it's a great thing. I created the HomeBoss listing system 7 years ago for Friday. Everything I did over the last 7 years was put in place for that eventuality that I could see coming. And my agents aren't scared at all. We're as excited as we could be. So the key is get creative. Don't just roll up in a ball and wither away. Get creative. And commissions are, and how we get paid they're available. Let me throw this one out at you. What if you actually started working on an hourly rate? And I have a good friend of mine now, he's since passed away. He used to do this 20 years ago. And he said, hey, everything around showing the house, setting up appointments, all that was $150 an hour. Everything that came to the commission or the contract and negotiations was $400 an hour. Because remember, folks, we have the same rights as an attorney to write a contract in every single state. Attorneys don't work for $150 an hour when they're taking on this liability. So he said everything around that is $400 an hour. And I will track the hours that you spend. And what I'll do is I'll present you when we get to closing an invoice for here's how many hours I've spent. And I'll either deduct that from what the seller was offering or you would have to pay the difference. Here's what he found, folks. People were ridiculously respectful of his time. They didn't call him up on a Sunday and, oh, by the way, Sundays was time and a half. So they didn't call him up, right? Because we've all gotten these phone calls. Hey, Bob, let's go look at this house. I'm not really probably very interested in it. It doesn't really what I want, but let's go look at it anyway. And you got to jump in the car and you drive down there and you do that. And they go, yeah, no, we were right. We didn't like it. Y'all have had that happen, right? If they knew you were charging them $150 an hour, do you think they'd do it now? If you want to take and show the value to the consumer of what you do, go ahead and set it up that way. They'll understand the value and they will give you massive value of your time because ultimately it's their charge. So what are you afraid of it for? Gosh, what if you took like an upfront retainer fee and you took your commission over like monthly payments, let's say over a 2 or a 3 year payment? Wow, consistent cash flow. That'd be horrible. So I'm not saying any of those are good solutions for you. I'm just saying don't be afraid of it. That's all. So this is an exciting time, in my opinion. We're going to be transparent to the consumer. The consumer will understand our value. We'll be paid more in line for our value. And the truth is, folks, many agents are going to fall away. They're just going to go, too much for me. That's okay. It's just more market share for the rest of us who understand this is a business. You should be excited about the future of real estate right now. My God, you can start being honest with consumers and tell them how it really works. Oh, no, the horror, right? And then you have the ability to be able to be creative, and you now have the opportunity to tell people why it's important they should work with you and you alone. You should welcome that. So I think it's an extremely exciting turn of events. And I do, again, I think MLS will be extinct in the next few years. And I think that's a good thing for the consumers, and it's certainly a good thing for agents. So with that, those are my thoughts on the settlement, the 5 things that you need to do this week to deal with that NAR settlement. I hope it gives you some things to think about, and we'll see you on next week's episode. Remember, if you list, you last. Talk to you next week.